The United States has a housing problem. A problem so deeply rooted that most young Americans just accept this as a cruel reality. But what if we told you it didn't have to be this way? In fact, what if we told you that for a very long time, it wasn't this way? Back in 1980, the median rent was just $243 per month, or about $983 in today's money. American families could afford a home on a single income in 1980, an idea now so unthinkable that it is entirely removed from society just one generation later, despite us living in a much richer economy today. Today, our housing crisis is getting worse and worse. But other countries don't offer the same fate because they embrace sensible rent controls, encourage new home construction, and support beautiful, well-maintained public housing. Don't we deserve nice things too? Let's take each of these solutions in turn. Rent control is one of the most immediate and proportionate responses to exponentially rising housing costs. A well-designed rent control policy gives immediate relief to millions of renters by imposing limitations on the amount landlords can hike rents annually. This effectively bans exploitative rental price gouging and gives working-class people access to privately built housing they otherwise couldn't afford. Rent control not only cuts housing costs for existing renters, but also lowers market rates across the board. It puts more money in the hands of working Americans rather than furthering enriching landlords and corporate investors. These controls also promote housing stability by keeping families in their homes and communities, and curbs gentrification by protecting tenants from getting priced out of their own neighborhoods. Despite ardent pushback from landlords and real estate lobbyists, Americans are winning the fight for rent control with real-world results.
The LA City Council is expected to vote today on more renter protections.
On Monday, rallies like this were held in major cities statewide.
When Los Angeles adopted a rent control, there was an immediate 37% drop in the amount of renters who moved compared with those in the preceding 12 months. In Manhattan, tenants in rent-regulated units were 10 times as likely to have lived in their homes for 20 years or more, compared with those in market rates, 35% compared with 3%. Back out west, Santa Monica reported similar results with enacting rent control measures. When done right, rent control would help make existing homes affordable while only impacting new construction projects many years in the future, long after new projects become profitable. That means rent control won't discourage private building like so many neoliberal critics claim. But those critics are right that price controls won't solve a supply problem. The U.S. today has a shortage of 7.3 million affordable homes for low-income renters. Why? Because housing construction is dominated by private speculators and wealthy homeowners. And one of their chief weapons in keeping home prices sky high and demand unmet is zoning. Zoning is a set of rules made by elected and appointed officials that regulate development. Through zoning laws, local governments essentially determine what buildings can be built and where, often splitting areas into categories like residential, commercial, industrial, and more. When New York City's zoning code was created in 1916, it was 85 pages long. When it was revamped in 1961, the new resolution was 539 pages. Since then, another 3,436 pages of amendments have been added. In New York today, there are about 150 different zoning types in use around the city. Complex and restrictive zoning has become an important part of the housing crisis. In a housing crisis and shortage, public policy should ensure that land where apartments are permitted is plentiful, not scarce and expensive. Yet long-standing zoning and land use policies are geared to do exactly the opposite, suppressing multifamily housing creation in the places that need it most. Against the interest of NIMBY homeowners, to rapidly bring down rental costs, we need to be able to rezone certain neighborhoods to build more housing with greater speed, and combine these efforts with socialist demands like rent control and the construction of public and cooperative housing to ensure affordability. Yes, I said that the government needs to get back in the business of housing construction. Public housing, it gets a bad rap in the United States. But that isn't the case everywhere, and certainly wasn't the case for generations in the United States. In Austria, Vienna, for example, during the city's Red Vienna period of socialist rule in the 1920s and 30s, 65,000 public housing units were built, funded in part by new luxury taxes on private villas, vehicles, domestic servants, and other high-end consumption. Today, more than half of Vienna's 1.9 million residents live in either public housing or subsidized housing. And although it's been under attack for years in places like New York City, public housing remains a vital lifeline for low-income families. It's a rising tide that lifts housing opportunities for all Americans. Simply put, public housing is a public option for housing. It's state-owned and can never be resold for profit. Yet our country loses 15,000 units every year to decay and lack of repair. Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is trying to change that. She recently introduced the Homes Act of 2024, which would create a Housing Development Authority, HDA, for the entire country. Its sole mission would be to build, buy, renovate, and operate social housing. That is housing with state and cooperative ownership, with permanent price protections and community control. It would be a radical departure from existing housing policy that drives up costs for tenants and disempowers them while lining the pockets of elite homeowners and investors. There's no need for us to accept our housing fates. Through rent control, public housing, and zoning reform, we have an arsenal of proven solutions to not only build more homes, but also make our cities affordable, desirable places to live for working families. A better world needs better homes, and socialists have a clear route to deliver them.